An aged witch stood in front of him, holding a tray of what looked horribly like whole human fingernails. She leered at him, showing mossy teeth. Harry backed away. I'm fine, thanks, he said. I'm just. Harry! What do you think you're doing down there? Harry's heart leapt. So did the witch. A load of fingernails cascaded down over her feet, and she cursed as the massive form of Hagrid, the Hogwarts gameskeeper, came striding towards them, beetle-black eyes flashing over his great bristling beard. Hagrid, Harry croaked in relief. I was lost. Blue powder. Hagrid seized Harry by the scruff of the neck and pulled him away from the witch, knocking the tray right out of her hands. Her shrieks followed them all the way along the twisting alleyway, out into bright sunlight. Harry saw a familiar snow-white marble building in the distance. Gringotts Bank. Hagrid had steered him right into Diagon Alley. You're a mess, said Hagrid gruffly, brushing soot off Harry so forcefully that he nearly knocked him into a barrel of dragon dung outside an apothecary. Skulking around Knockturn Alley. I dunno, dodgy place, Harry. Don't want no one to see you down there. I realise that, said Harry, ducking as Hagrid made it to brush him off again. I told you I was lost. What were you doing down there anyway? I was looking for a flesh-eating slug repellent, growled Hagrid. They're ruining the school's cabbages. You're not on your own. I'm staying with the Dursleys, but we got separated, Harry explained. I've got to go and find them. They set off together down the street. How come you never wrote back to me, said Hagrid, as Harry jogged alongside him. He had to make 3 steps for every stride of Hagrid's enormous boots. Harry explained all about Dobby and the Dursleys. Ruddy muggles, growled Hagrid. If I'd have known. Harry, over here. Harry looked up and saw Hermione Granger standing at the top of the white flight of steps to Gringotts. She ran down to meet them, her bushy brown hair flying behind her. What happened to your glasses? Hello, Hagrid. Oh, it's wonderful to see you two again. Are you coming into Gringotts, Harry, as soon as I've found the Weasleys? Said Harry. You won't have to wait for long, grinned Hagrid. Harry and Hermione looked around. Sprinting up the crowded street were Ron, Fred, George, Percy, and Mr. Weasley. Harry, Mr. Weasley panted. We'd hoped you'd only gone one grade too far. He mopped his glistening bald patch. Molly's frantic. She's coming now. Where did you come out? Ron asked. Knockturn Alley, said Hagrid grimly. Brilliant, said Fred and George together. We've never been allowed in, said Ron enviously. I should really hope well. Think not, growled Hagrid. Mrs. Weasley now came galloping into view, her handbag swinging wildly in one hand, Ginny just clinging on to the other. Oh, Harry, oh, my dear, you could have been anywhere. Gasping for breath, she pulled a large clothes brush out of her bag and began sweeping off the soot Hagrid hadn't managed to beat away. Mr. Weasley took Harry's glasses, gave them a tap with his wand, and returned them, good as new. Well, got to be off, said Hagrid, who was having his hands wrung by Mrs. Weasley. Knockturn Alley, if you hadn't found him, Hagrid. See you at Hogwarts. He strode away, head and shoulders taller than anyone else in the packed street. Guess who I saw in Bogan and Burke's? Harry asked Ron and Hermione as they climbed the Gringotts steps. Malfoy and his father. Did Lucius Malfoy buy anything? Said Mr. Weasley sharply behind them. No, he was selling, so he's worried, said Mr. Weasley with grim satisfaction. Oh, I'd love to get Lucius Malfoy for something. Be careful, also, said Mrs. Weasley sharply, as they were ushered into the bank by a bowing goblin at the door. That family's trouble. Don't go biting off more than you can chew. So you don't think I'm a match for Lucius Malfoy, said Mr. Weasley indignantly. But he was distracted almost at once by the sight of Hermione's parents, who were standing nervously at the counter that ran all along the great marble hall, waiting for Hermione to introduce them. But you're muggles, said Mr. Weasley delightedly. We must have a drink. What's that you've got there? Oh, you're changing muggle money. Molly, look! He pointed excitedly at the £10 note notes in Mr. Granger's hands. Meet you back here, Ron said to Hermione, as the Weasleys and Harry were led off to their underground vaults by another Gringotts goblin. The vaults were reached by means of small goblin-driven carts that sped along miniature train tracks through the bank's underground tunnels. Harry enjoyed the breakneck journey down to the Weasleys' vault, but felt dreadful, far worse than he had in Knockturn Alley when it was opened. There was a very small pile of silver sickles inside, and just one gold galleon. Mrs. Weasley felt right into the corners before sweeping the whole lot into her bag. Harry felt even worse when they reached his vault. He tried to block the contents from view as he hastily shoved handfuls of coins into his leather bag. Back outside on the marble steps, they were all separated. Percy muttered vaguely about needing a new quill. Fred and George had spotted their friend from Hogwarts, Lee Jordan. Mrs. Weasley and Ginny were going to the second-hand robe shop. Mr. Weasley was insisting on taking the Grangers off to the Leaky Cauldron for a drink. "We'll all meet at Flourish and Blotts in an hour to buy you school books," said Mrs. Weasley, setting off with Ginny. "And not one step down Knockturn Alley," she shouted at the twins' retreating backs. Harry, Ron, and Hermione strolled off along the winding cobbled street. The bag of gold, silver, and bronze jangling cheerfully in Harry's pocket was clamoring to be spent. So he brought 3 large strawberry and peanut butter ice creams, which they slurped happily as they wandered up the alley, examining the fascinating shop windows. Ron gazed longingly at a full set of Chudley Cannon robes in the windows of Quality Quidditch Supplies, until Hermione dragged them off to buy ink and parchment next door. In Gamble and Jape's Wizarding Joke Shop, they met Fred, George, and Lee Jordan, who were stocking up on Dr. Filibuster's fabulous Wet Start No Heat fireworks. And in a tiny junk shop full of broken wands, wonky brass scales, and old cloaks covered in potion stains, they found Percy, deeply immersed in a small and deeply boring book called Prefects Who Gained Power, a study of Hogwarts prefects in their later careers. Ron read aloud off the back cover. "That sounds fascinating." "Go away," Percy snapped. "Of course he's very ambitious, Percy. He's got it all planned out. He wants to be Minister of Magic," Ron told Harry and Hermione in an undertone as they left Percy to it. An hour later, they headed for Flourish and Blotts. They were by no means the only ones making their way to the bookshop. As they approached it, they saw, to their surprise, a large crowd jostling outside the doors, trying to get in. The reason for this was proclaimed by a large banner stretched across the upper windows. "Gilderoy Lockhart will be signing copies of his autobiography, Magical Me, today from 12:30 to 4:30 p.m.